how's it going, guys? Welcome to Audio Addiction. We have Mythmaking with us today. He can say his name and what he does in the band.
Hi, I'm Mythmaking. My name is Isaac Cito. Mythmaking is a solo experimental singer-songwriting project of mine. So I did all of the instruments and the vocals and the lyric writing and everything on the record, and it was produced by Laurie Matheson.
Awesome. So, first question, Isaac. I asked this to a lot of people on here. How did you kind of get started out in music? What was kind of the process like when you first started out? And obviously, how did you, get into doing the stuff that you're doing for Mythmaking now?
hmm how far back do you want me to go?
Go
Like
as far
right
back
to
as
the
you
beginning
want.
of music?
All
Sure.
the way beginning, yeah.
Well, I started playing piano when I was a kid.
Okay.
Like I studied a little bit of classical piano. When I was maybe 12 years old, my dad purchased me a guitar, and he was really into just like classic rock and country music and things like that. So I kind of transitioned from classical music into that world, and I started playing guitar. Um, I played in a lot of like rock bands
Sure, yeah.
through junior high and high school and things like that. The first gigging project I was in was a shoegaze and like largely instrumental project called
Mm-hmm.
Sea Bloom. Um, I transitioned to a noise and ambient group with elements of black metal called Redress around 2016, 2017. And when that band broke up, I started this project, and it kind of took me um, into the pandemic, and I put out this record, The Pit, in May of last year.
Awesome. Well, how has the response been of the pit? I checked out a few tracks, and I thought it was interesting. This isn't like typically something that I do have a lot of different like kind of like metal genres and stuff like that, but I don't feel like I've really kind of delved into like drone and that like style of music. So for me, it was very interesting and kind of a different approach, at least from what I have on the channel. So what kind of got you into like drone and like black metal and that sort of style of music? Because I feel like you kind of run a bunch of different gambits throughout the songs that I've listened to so far, and I have the rest to listen to at a later point. Who kind of inspired you as an artist to kind of get into the sounds that you're in with myth making now?
I think probably the first band that really got me interested in approaching music and guitar from a more ambient perspective was were bands like My Bloody Valentine or Sonic Youth, you know?
Yeah.
Um, I just loved the way that they approached the instrument from a more textural space
Hmm.
and something that allowed you to just react with your instrument as sound rather than as chord progression or melody or I don't know, diatonic harmony or these kinds of like um, musical expressions that are maybe um, more commonly used and more commonly available.
Sure, yeah.
So I got into bands like that. I think one of the really formative experiences for me feeling resonance with that type of music was I don't remember what year it was, but I saw Merzbow play
Okay.
here in Calgary. I don't know if you're familiar with him at all.
I am not,
Um,
but I'll have to check it out.
he's a Japanese noise artist, and
Okay.
he's sort of at the vanguard of um, pieces of that scene. And he's got like a huge discography and lots of he's traversed a lot of different territory in that type of music. And I saw him years ago, and it was the loudest show I'd ever seen, I think. And I remember like not really being interested in that type of music. It was
Mhm.
just I knew that he was such a pivotal figure. For 10 or 15 bucks, I had to go, you know? Um, and I remember walking upstairs, and the venue I saw him at was just playing like rock radio
Yeah,
upstairs.
sure, yeah.
And I had been listening to him all evening, and suddenly that music felt alien to me. It felt confusing and not understandable somehow.
Sure, yeah.
And I remember taking the train home and listening to the clack of the wheels against the train tracks and the wind blowing through an open window. And I just recognized that after having seen him make his music, that I could understand the sounds of the world as music.
Sure, yeah.
And it really felt that way for me, and it didn't last forever. Um, After a few days, I don't know, my senses and my hearing kind of normalized, and I began to understand those as normal, everyday city sounds again. But for that ride, it really was music. And that's something that always stuck with me.
That's awesome. And like I feel like with that sort of type of artist, like, and just kind of going on a spur of like, oh, I'll just go see this guy like at a random thing. It's cool that it kind of like unlocked your like mental ability to like kind of see, life as, as being kind of a musical thing. And obviously like the more like normative type of music that's out there seemed a little bit like strange. I thought that was pretty interesting. I mean, I feel like myself, like this year, I've given kind of myself the goal of to listen to different things that I wouldn't say that I'm not necessarily comfortable with, but just like stuff that I particularly don't listen to on a normal basis. And so when you had messaged me in ACN, I was like, I have to have this guy on because I did listen to like most of the pit, and I was like, this is a lot different from what I typically have, and to me it was very interesting. So it spoke to me in that aspect of wanting to have your music on. But I guess like that's really cool that you kind of were inspired by this like Japanese artist that just kind of does like noise and like drone and sort of stuff like that. I find that pretty impressive. Is there any like other artists in particular other than him that really inspire your work, or is it more so like stuff like outside like the natural things of life?
He's definitely one. Another touchstone for me, at least for the ambience in my music, is William Basinski.
Okay.
Um, I'm so he's famous for a series of recordings he did called the Disintegration Loops. These were tapes that essentially like little segments of loops, and if you listen to his music, he's got like little snippets of orchestral or choral arrangements, and like synth pads that he'll kind of mix into things. And these recordings were famous because as I understand the story, he took these tapes to the top of his apartment building, and he was just kind of digging through crates for ideas for the next record. And he started recording these loops as they were playing on the top of his building, and they physically started to degrade as he played them. And you can kind of hear in these recordings the materiality of the tape breaking down into pops and cracks, and it's stretching and time warping the music in a really organic sort of way. And you get to hear the physical product of the music degrading. And that's something I think I've always been attracted to. That's just some sort of like the interference of the medium of the recording, and these little things that you can't control that just happen. I've always thought that they were beautiful and quite human, and I like incorporating those types of sounds into my music.
That's definitely cool. I'll have to give that a listen. I feel like for me, it's more of like having you on was more of an experience for me. Like obviously, I want to promote what you're doing here, but like for me, it's like when I can learn from an aspect of somebody else that like of a music genre that I'm particularly not familiar with. It's always a cool way to like understand what you're listening to, and then like kind of like impose it on like what I'm listening to and be like, okay, these are artists that I'm not particularly familiar with, but then when I go to listen to the people that influence you and stuff like that, and I listen to that and then I kind of counteract it with what you're playing, it's really it offers this really cool like correlation between those two things, and showing that like obviously you have your own originality in the way that you create music, but also have like the stronger influences, in terms of what you write, and kind of finding that like middle ground between the two that, at least for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people watching this, would be interested to see how like you create music, and how you kind of go across the different ways of like, this is what like I'm thinking versus like the end product. So
Hmm.
you know it's really cool. And then I guess more specifically, like, how long did it take you to kind of like, obviously you said you've done it up until the pandemic hit, like, um how long of a period of time were you like really working on the pit? And do you feel like because of the pandemic you were able to kind of like focus on it a little bit more and like put a little bit more effort into it, or do you think it came out the way that you wanted to in the end result?
I started working on these songs maybe in the middle of 2017.
Okay.
Um, there was one song on this album, Wells Will Follow You Wherever You Go, um, that I was playing with a previous band. And when that band dissolved, I sort of took that song as the centerpiece of a new solo album
Mm-hmm.
and just wrote around it. And it honestly was a very difficult and cathartic process for me, um, just to start again and to reckon um, the death of a band and those experiences and those friendships
Sure. Yeah.
with the beginning of a new project and feeling feeling self-sufficient about playing on my own and making music on my own. So I think emotionally and psychologically, a lot of the lyrics, a lot of the compositions, a lot of the music and influence and art and everything on this record is me just trying to find myself again and trying to find my own voice and continue to make music in spite of um, the dissolution of that band, in spite of my own fears and anxieties about continuing as a musician on my own.
Yeah. No, that's definitely powerful. And like, obviously I feel like, from what I've listened to so far, it does have that kind of like that feeling, and I feel like a lot of people can translate it into their own way of thinking about it. But like, I do I do feel kind of a weight to it, which I think obviously adds to kind of the overall theming of the record. And it definitely has that kind of like, again, it has that like that sound, like it's a sound that I wasn't particularly thinking about. Like when I first listened to it, I was just like, I kind of like take it all in. I look at the album art, I try to read the lyrics, I try to follow line and be like intent upon listening to it. And it does have this kind of like ominous feeling to it, which, I mean, I'm sure off the heels of being in a band for a period of time and obviously trying to make your way into writing your solo material, and like and starting that new chapter. You can feel kind of that like weight of those sorts of emotions, like being anxious and like and all that sort of stuff. And I feel like that translates well with the sound that you've created and stuff. And um just the emotional level and aspect of it, I think I kind of resonated with in certain aspects of like things personal to me. And so I thought it was really awesome. And again, I highly implore all of my fans to go check it out, and to listen to it, because it was something that I felt like, again, that I'm not too familiar with, but I think it definitely hit me more on an emotional level, because like I was able to kind of like really dig deep into it, and like kind of like really, I don't want to say study it, because I wasn't like, it was like really intently listening to it. And I think like with a lot of the stuff that I do here, I like try to make sure I listen to stuff intently, and being honest with the type of music that's created. So definitely appreciate that. And again, I'll leave a link below to go check out the pit. But the next question, Isaac, keeping it more current, who are types of artists that you've been listening to lately, maybe on like your day-to-day listening, free time listening? What have you been listening to lately?
The thing I've been playing the most recently is the recent Nick Cave and Warren Ellis
Yes.
collaboration, Carnage. I've been playing that a lot. I've been playing it every day, multiple times a day, just to get in it. And I really love Nick Cave's work. I think he's, especially as he's gotten older, and especially since the death of his son, his work has gotten so vulnerable, and you can hear the age in his voice, and you can hear, um, I don't know, all the melody creeping in with Warren's synths and string arrangements and things like that, and it's so broken, and it's so weary, and it's so hopeful, and it's so full of love, and yeah, I love that record. I love what he's been doing in the last few years. That's been really inspiring.
Yeah, no, I had a recent artist on here, and they also recommended Nick Cave, and so ironically enough, I went to go listen to it, and it wasn't intentional to ask this question and to have you say that answer, but I was like, man, I was like, I really kind of have to dive more headfirst into this sort of stuff because I was blown away, and like I didn't really read a lot of backstory about the record. I was just kind of like, they said listen to this, just like, enjoy it. So I went to go listen to it, and I was like, man, this is so like so emotional, so like vulnerable, as you said. And I didn't know that unfortunately his son passed away. And so, now that I think about the record, and I'm like kind of like getting those like flashbacks of like the record itself, like I was like, man, this one definitely has more of an emotional weight to it now, and I'm gonna probably go back and listen to it again to just kind of get more of a flavor of it. But yeah, no, that the Nick Cave record was fantastic, so I would highly recommend people to go check that out too. Is there anything else that you've been listening to other than that, Isaac? Or
Um, yeah, I've been getting into the Pogues recently.
okay,
Um, yeah, I think over the last while, especially as I've been working on my own, I've been trying to find maybe more traditional singer-songwriter artists
sure,
as well.
yeah,
Guys, people that have more lyricism, and maybe easier discernible like folk melodies and things like that.
sure,
Because I just think that that's like a vehicle that makes sense for me right now. I've been listening to that. I've been listening to Tom Waits. I've been listening to um, the Matana Roberts Coin series of recordings.
okay.
She's an American jazz saxophonist, and ambient and sample artist and whatever else. Um, what else have I been listening to? That 2020 Bob Dylan record as well.
Okay.
Um, Sumac, if you know them,
Nice. Yeah,
you're a metal
Sumac.
guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
lots of Sumac. Um, I think I don't know. I'm curious maybe how this is for you, coming maybe from a metal background as
Sure.
well, but I find that the music, like I grew up listening to metal, and that's always had a piece in my heart. And one thing that I think has really inspired um, the rest of my listening trajectory is just that visceral, raw emotion of metal, those peaks and those valleys, and um, that vulnerability again. I know, for instance, a band like Sumac talks about love constantly in their
Uh-huh.
releases,
Yeah.
even though it's very, very heavy, very tense, um, and dissonant music. And I think that's kind of how I see music a little bit, is that we all work in these different mediums and these different genres, but I think largely we create for similar reasons.
Oh, a hundred
And
percent.
it's the specifics, they don't really matter. If I feel like an artist is making music with love and with care and with craft, yeah, the genre is kind of irrelevant.
Oh, 100%. To answer your question about like music and stuff, like I grew up listening to like classic rock. My parents are like big classic rock heads, so like that's what got me into it. And then, like you said, kind of like the visceral, like emotional aspect of like metal music. I feel like it's always been something that like that is just like more powerful than anything that I could hear on like a normal radio station. Like if I had like the car radio in my car, like I don't feel like a pop artist or like, and there probably are pop artists out there, so I don't want to skew them all in one direction, but I do feel like metal just generally has that kind of like quality that's like in your face sometimes, but it doesn't necessarily have to be about something that is angry or something that is like, you know, something that's dark or evil or whatever. And there's definitely certain bands that kind of take on that quality for sure. But I do feel like a lot of the artists really kind of write metal music more specifically because it just is that like emotional outlet that just speaks more to like the lyricism, and then just the way that kind of like I feel like the instrumentals back up just the emotion, the rawness, you know, the scream, you know, somebody maybe like singing or whatever it may be. It just has, to me, something in my head just like clicked when I was like kind of like a young teen, and like and it's always stuck with me, and that's why I've always kind of been more akin to like metal music. And then obviously I got into like, you know, folk artists, and I got into indie artists, and I kind of branched out more as I kind of grew. I want to say I grew out of metal. It just kind of fostered more ideologies in terms of the music that I listen to now. And I feel like I'm pretty well rounded in terms of who I have on here as well as what I listen to in my free time. But but yeah, I feel like metal always, like you said, Isaac, will always have a special place in my heart as like one of my, you know, all-time favorite genres. And I think it's mostly because it just has that like emotional attachment to it that really kind of makes me come back, whether it's, you know, an artist I'm very familiar with or an artist that I've never heard of that I want to get into more, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
But the next question, Isaac, keeping it fun, what is your favorite food to eat? What's the go-to?
My favorite food. I might have to say laksa.
Ooh, laksa, nice. Okay.
Yeah. My mom makes a mean laksa.
Awesome. Well, shout outs to Isaac's mom for making mean laksa. I haven't had laksa in a very long time, so I'll have to, next time I have it, I'll have to shoot you a message. But the next question, Isaac, keeping it fun, music related, of course.
Hmm.
If you were to have a guest spot on an upcoming record and a producer you'd like to work with in the future, who would they be?
Give me a second.
Yep, no problem.
Um, I'm not really sure, but I mean, we spoke about Nick Cave already. I think
Yeah,
that would be a dream of mine,
sure
just to
thing.
be able to have a conversation with him, um, or to like be in this, even to be in the same room as him would be incredible, you know? Um, and I think there's like there's a host of artists that I'd love to play with or record with or be able to speak with and have a conversation with. And I think for me, it's not, there is a little bit of that fan worship in there, you know, of
Oh,
course
sure.
there is.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Um, but I think too that there's a piece of the people that I love and the people that I listen to, I I love because I think they're people that have committed their lives to their artistic practice.
Yeah.
And if I'm inspired by them, my assumption is that I would have lots to learn from them. Of course, as a fan, you only have their recordings to go
Uh,
against, and you just have to listen and pick out what you can. But I would love to be in a creative or conversational space with any of my heroes, just to be able to speak to them and understand why they write what they write and get some context for how it is that their lives are woven into the music that they make. Because I think that's something really important for me, and it's something I'm trying to weave into the work that I do. Producers, I can't honestly say that I'm that familiar with. I follow artists more than I follow um,
producers.
the producers. Um, yeah.
That's a fair answer. I feel like whenever I ask this question, I am often met with like I don't know, like I'd love to work with everyone. And I feel like that's the commonality of like musicians and people that do this sort of thing, where I think it's always interesting to see like the perspective of like I have some people that are like, oh well, my voice would work really well with this person's voice, so I feel like this would work out. Or like, or some people go the route of like, oh my god, this person's my musical mentor, like somebody that inspired me to write the music that I write, and I'd love to work with them or all of them. And so it's always interesting for me because like, I always think about this question myself, like who, like who would I want to interview or who would I want to like have on my channel to like do it. And I feel like it would be very tough to just be like one specific person. That's the one person I'd want to get. And
Hmm.
but I feel like if I have to be kind of like more specific, I feel like we did mention Nick Cave, but I do feel like your voice and his voice would mesh pretty well. And I think creatively and like songwriting wise, I feel like you guys kind of peel from the same wavelength, if that makes sense. And so it'd be cool to hear you guys kind of collaborate on something. And Nick Cave, if you watch this, feel free to reach out. That would be great. I just want to say that I facilitated it, so that would be awesome. But yeah, no, that I feel like whenever I ask this question, it's always like a tumultuous question, but overall, it's like cool to see the perspective of the artist and like who they would want to choose or go with.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think for me, like it's like a nice, fantastical question.
Thank you.
Um, I don't know. It reminds me of like, do you know a band called Slow Dive?
I do. Yeah, they're great. Fantastic.
Um, I met Neil Halstead once at the end of a Slow Dive show, and I was with a bandmate, and we had met because we love Slow Dive, and
Sure.
we
Yeah.
met because of our mutual love of souvlaki. And I had like a few minutes just to chat and have a beer with him, and tell him that his music means something to me, and that the reason I'm standing here at your show is because I formed a band with my friend and we love your music. Like it's I think I imagine that for a lot of artists, it would be wonderful just to be able to express gratitude to the
Sure.
people whose work you love so much. I don't really think about it in terms of if my voice would sit well. I think a lot of the world I work in is maybe similar to Nick Cave's, not because I'm trying to imitate him, but because I'm trying to maybe understand similar aspects about what it means to create. So it's maybe inevitable that a couple things sound similar or that we traverse similar pathways. And I imagine that's the same for artists that wear their influences on their sleeves. It's like every folk artist cites Bob Dylan, you know?
That's
We're
true.
all trying to chase that.
No, absolutely. I feel like, like I said, when I have artists on, like it's not necessarily like I feel like it's more so like you're paying homage to who you admire and who you love as an artist and who kind of like you said brings people together and like um and I think that's impressive. And obviously you would want to show your admiration for being a fan and a fan of the band, and I'm sure as artists they want to kind of give back, and I'm sure if they did it for everybody then their creative energy probably wouldn't be as good just because they'll be using it. um but it would be interesting. Obviously,
Hmm.
like I think of it from the aspect of like a listener, and I'm sure as you as an artist, like it has to fit in the sensibilities of what you're creating and stuff. So I love the kind of open-endedness of the question, and more so like kind of peering into what people enjoy and that sort of thing. um, but keeping it more, I guess, self-centered to you, Isaac, the reason you're on here. Um, what would be one track that you would recommend to people checking out Mythmaking if they've never heard you before? You know, I feel like with artists, all of your songs are your babies, and I respect that because that's how I am with the interviews and stuff. But if you had to have like kind of a, I guess per se, a standout track to new listeners, which one would you recommend?
I might recommend the longest track on the album.
That is all good.
Track three, Wells Will Follow You Wherever You Go. To me, it's not necessarily that it's my favorite. They're all my babies,
Sure, I got you.
but it's definitely the one that I think that started me down this particular road and it's a piece of why this project is the way it is right now. I think I had a transformative psychedelic experience, and that song was the result. Um, and I'm trying to carry that thread of love through my work, through my relationships, um, that self-love. Um, and I think that one, it was an important, I think, transition song for me
Sure.
because I had performed it previously with the band. And I took my guitar and my lyrics and I rearranged the track because it hadn't been recorded. We had just played it like a few times live. Um, I think it was important for me to stake my claim on that song and say, I'm proud of this song, um, and I need to be able to own it, and I need to be able to play it again. Um, and that, I think, was like the early impetus for why I needed to start a solo project, was I can't let this song go. It has to ride again.
And that's great because like that was, I think that was, if I'm not mistaken, I think that was the last song I landed on. Like I finished all the way out. I was like, I saw the I saw the timestamp on the track, and I was like, man, this is a long one. I'm like, am I gonna be able to like? Not that I wouldn't be able to focus because this is basically my fun job that I do and I enjoy doing it.
Hmm.
So like in my head, I was like, I was like, I can get through this. Like I can really like honed in, focus, sit down. I made myself like a cup of tea and like sat down and listened to it and earlier last week, and I was like amazed by like the content in it, obviously, but I was like more impressed that the way that the song kind of changes over time, like being a longer track, it like I feel like there's definitely like the way that like kind of the lyrics and like the instruments together just to me it kind of like, I don't know if it was maybe just because it was just a longer track, it just kind of like it has this like flow and like ebb to it that I thought was really interesting, and it made me almost want to listen to it again before I came on here, just because I was like so enamored by how like everything kind of like moved and flowed and stuff like that. And then to kind of find out from you that the song was, different from what was on, in the pit. Um, how did you kind of go through that change? Was it some, like you said, I know you had like, you had experience like, things going on. Um, how would you say it changed a lot from like what it originally sounded like all the way to like the end from what I heard? Because I always find it interesting when I have artists on and the song that they may have originally written with another band or another group or like themselves at another point in their time, and they change it. Um, do you feel like the more current situation you were feeling, because I don't know if you like put that song on the back burner and then kind of like worked on it from 2017 to this point now, or last year, I mean, um, how much of a change, and like do you feel like there were certain points in that song where you're like, I think we're at the point that I want to be at, or did you kind of like be like, I could probably do a little bit more with it and like press on a little bit? Because I always thought it was interesting so far, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you all about that song.
Sure thing.
Um, when I had first written it, I was playing it. It's like an eight-string electric guitar that you're hearing at the beginning.
Nice.
It's just
Yeah.
my voice. And honestly, I was just in despair. Um, not necessarily even personal despair, but just existential despair. That that's the opening line, just we suffer our whole lives in a desert. And we all do. And everyone's suffering and everyone's in pain. And I'm sure that maybe the context of the pandemic um, shifts what that song is for listeners that are experiencing distress at this in this strange global moment.
Yeah.
Um, but when I originally wrote it, it was just a solo guitar and voice. Um, the original versions of it in my previous band had a piano on it. Um, there's that transition section, but on the first day of spring, I bear witness to an author, where that was kind of the build and the piano kind of takes it out. And one thing that I really wanted to make sure of um, when I recorded it alone was that I felt that transcendence. I just felt that it was growing and it had to be big and it had to sweep you away emotionally.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, because that's what that experience felt like to me. So I arranged a lot of like synth string sections and that descending piano line at the end. But it still stayed kind of naked, and I think the whole record ended up staying a little bit naked. Um, yeah, I think I just wanted that feeling. I, it's, I don't know, it's all very abstract for me, I think, because I don't really think of, like, I don't necessarily need to get a particular melody or a riff
Sure. Yeah.
into into a section of a song. I think for me, like, I want to cry to my own music.
Yeah.
Like, so if it doesn't move me in that way, my assumption is that it won't do that for anyone else. Um, so I'm just trying to move myself
Sure.
in
Yeah.
that arrangement, and hopefully other people resonate with it.
No, that's definitely powerful. I can realize aspects of that now, like having you say things, and I think like obviously I don't always get the opportunity to have somebody on and like to have a song that maybe hits me emotionally, kind of like to bounce that off of, somebody that's written it. But I think in your case, like I did feel like you were saying with kind of like the strings and the synth and the descending piano line, like I did start to feel like that sweep of emotions like throughout the song and through that moment, obviously. And I think that's important because I think like a lot of artists, when I have them on, like I want people to have that moment of listening to it and really like actively listening to it, really soaking it in and stuff like that, because there is, I feel like in certain aspects of like how we listen to music, it's like, okay, like, and I'm one to do it too. Like I'll be driving and listening to music, or I'll like be, cleaning and listening to music in my apartment or whatever. And sometimes I don't feel like I get the full like moments within a song, and I felt like with your stuff, like I had to take that opportunity to really like delve in and sit down and make sure I'm like really in tune to it, because there are certain aspects of the song that I feel like a lot of people might miss out on, or like the lyricism matching up with like the music itself may not hit as much as it would if you were just kind of like passively listening to it. And so that is what I think got me more so than anything else. Like obviously there was an emotional level to it, but I think just if you are going to listen to it, people who are watching this, like I do feel like it would implore you to take the active approach and really kind of sit down and listen to it, because it is something that, at least for me, spoke more to me when I was like listening to it and like really in tune with it, rather than to just kind of like just passively listen to it in my car or like whatever it may be. And so I like that was obviously it's the one that I stopped on and the one that I like the most, so I'm hoping that the rest of it keeps that level engagement for me. I would imagine, because I listened to the longest track off the record, so I'm hoping that I feel the same way after it's over with. Um, but yeah, I would recommend that to people listening. But the next question be Isaac, another fun one. If you were to compile a musical lineup, who would be like on your dream lineup? Like, which bands would you want to include to play along with you?
Um, I think I think if I'm gonna run down just like and like absurd fantasy, like a
Yeah,
fantasy
just
football
do it.
lineup, but like for a gig, um,
You got to.
maybe we'd open with uh, I don't know, I would get all my favorite artists. I would get Bill
Okay, do it up.
Callahan, I would get Tom Waits, I would get Nick Cave, I would get William Basinski, I would get My Bloody Valentine, I would get the ghost of Miles Davis. I don't know.
That would be quite the lineup. I would be, especially the ghost of Miles Davis. I feel like that would be the real showstopper.
Mhm. What an encore that would be.
That would be. Um, the next thing, Isaac. Uh, what if you were trapped on an island for the next month, and there was one record you could bring with you? What would it be?
I'm just gonna keep playing Carnage,
Carnage.
honestly. I'm probably still gonna continue to play it through the month.
That's fair. Honestly, that's yeah. That's I would agree with that. That's a fair assessment. And then the last thing, Isaac, the reason you're on here, tell them about myth making, where they can find you at on social media, where they can check the pit out, and anything else you'd like to plug, talk about, things of that nature.
So you can find the pit on Bandcamp at mythmaking.bandcamp.com. You can follow me on Instagram and at Facebook at mythmakingmusic. Um, yeah, I hope that people that are watching listen and that you find some resonance, and that if you do listen, that you make, as Brandon suggested, make some active space for it. Um, I certainly would really appreciate that, even though there is a good chance that I might never know that you listened to it. Um,
Let
I
him know in
think,
the comments. You should just let him know if you listen to it or not.
um, yeah, I think it's something that I posted actually as well in the Asian Creative Network. But this is this is my story, and this is a piece of the last few years of my life trying to find a way to sing and to play music and to retain my creative energy and my artistry, and and I think in some way everyone's music is this. This just happens to be mine, and I'm very, very grateful if you take the time out of your life to listen to me.
There we go. Well, go check out myth making. Obviously, I want to give a shout outs to ACN. I've found a lot of cool people, a lot of Asian people on ACN, and I feel like I haven't had enough Asian representation on my channel, so I always appreciate people like Isaac for coming on and talking about their story and their musical background and all that sort of stuff. But seriously, go check out Myth Making. I will leave all of the links in the description. You can go check out the pit. I'll leave a link for that as well. Please, as Isaac and I have both implored, please go listen to it actively. Spend time, carve some time out of your day to listen to it. It's definitely worth your time. I'm excited to listen to the rest of it and really delve into it a little bit more. And it's one that I would recommend listening to for sure. If you enjoyed this interview, share, like, and subscribe. It goes a long way. It helps me get out to more people like you, so it's always greatly appreciated. And thanks, of course, to Isaac for coming on and telling his story. And hopefully, you had a good time, man.
Thanks for giving me this space.